Good afternoon, good evening. This is the Leader's Pause. And as always, we start with a question. What is the one thing you can do to get yourself unstuck when you are absolutely unsure of what to do? There is, believe it or not, a magic question, and it works 100% of the time to get yourself unstuck and clue you into the answer that if your integrity itself could tell you this is what you need to do next. That's what this question unlocks. So we're going to do that as well as talk about some other questions to help get other people unstuck. And then we're going to talk about what to help get you unstuck right here on the Leader's Pause. So tune in.
Welcome to the Leader's Pause, where leaders like you tune in to find calm, get clear, and level up. Tune in with best-selling author, speaker, and coach Hal Runkel as he helps you take back your time, your energy, and your decision-making power. All you have to do is learn to press your own pause button first. So, take a break, take a breath, take a knee, and learn to access your greatest human superpower, the ability to pause, think, and decide for yourself. It's time to find calm, get clear, and level up. The Leader's Pause starts now.
Hey, folks, this is the Leader's Pause. I'm your host, Hal Runkel, and you are listening to the show that helps leaders learn to level up. And the best way I know, the very best way I know. And there's more and more people who are saying this. Certainly, I'm not the first by any means, but the best way I know to advance your leadership influence, both on yourself and those that you've been called to lead, is by learning to ask better questions. Well, actually, before that, it's learning to ask questions, learning to recognize that questions are far better than answers or statements in helping people actually move off of whatever they are doing. So much of what leadership is helping people move. You're creating a movement within an individual who needs to perform better, movement within a team in order to begin to be more productive. Movement is life. That is one of my wife and I's constant reminders to each other. We actually got the phrase a couple of ways, couple of places. One was from the Brad Pitt movie, The World War Z, and he is talking to a family that's holed up in an apartment. There's a zombie apocalypse, and he's wanting them to come with him. And he says, movement is life. Movement is life. They don't move and they don't live, those people. Movement is life is also something I learned when I was only 45 years old. I had to get a hip replacement, total left hip replacement, huge foot-long thing of titanium pounded down into my femur, replaced don't go on YouTube and watch a hip replacement surgery. It's disgusting. It is. These guys are carpenters and mechanics. And what was amazing is 2 hours after my surgery, 2 hours, I was walking up and down stairs with huge scars. I mean, these are not small scars, huge scars walking up and downstairs. Why? Because movement is life. We used to, when they started off doing hip replacement surgeries, it was put you in a full body cast and let your body heal, and they would have no movement whatsoever for weeks. You'd be in the hospital when it first began because they didn't understand. No, movement is what creates life. And so movement is healing, and they're telling you, get up and moving around. I've had back surgery as well. Same thing. Get moving. Well, how do we get ourselves moving? And more difficult, how do we help other people? How do we get other people to move? We can tell people what to do. And that is usually the easiest go-to. When in coaching leaders, that is one of the things I'm always struck by is how if you've had any success whatsoever in telling people what to do and seeing them do it, maybe you've been in a very top-down hierarchical system like the U.S. military or a lot of large corporations act this way. You say it, they do it. Maybe that's the way you thought about parenting. Maybe that's the way you were raised as a kid. They say it, you do it. In some situations, that can work, but never, ever does it work as well as asking people questions to help them learn to think so that they can actually make the decision for themselves and own what they're doing. That's the legacy of telling people what to do is you might get compliance once, twice, 1,000 times. Every time it lessens their motivation to think for themselves. It lessens their motivation to initiate things for themselves. And so much of leadership is helping people learn to take better initiative. We prize those people who want to, think for themselves, see something and take care of it, think for themselves and think for the team benefit. What could I do next? You can't get there by telling them, hey, you need to think for yourself. You can't get there by just saying, you need to do this and don't think, just do it. Again, you might get compliance, but you don't get true movement if what you're wanting to do is change an overall pattern. If what you're wanting to do is create a system where initiative is prized, rewarded, where innovation that comes through thinking, through initiation, actually leads to new results, new products, new services, new answers, new movement. That's what we want. We want people to move towards making a sale, move towards making a decision, move towards making a difference. And that's where questions come in. And there are a million questions to ask, but for the first thing is you have to be committed to asking them. What does it look like when instead of, well, you need to do this, you step back and say, well, what have you thought about doing so far? What have you tried so far? And those are two of my first questions that help create movement in others. What have you done so far? Or what have you thought about doing? And what have you tried? So many times when people are coming to us with a problem, the best thing to look for is what are their attempted solutions thus far? Because not only will that tell you what they've tried and is not working, and that gives you a clue into their frustration and a little bit of their hopelessness a lot of times, but asking them what they've tried so far also gives you a clue as to how they've actually diagnosed the problem. By looking at the answers they've attempted, the solutions they've attempted, you get a clue as to what they're using to define or how they're defining the problem. And so many times we get in trouble because we have misdiagnosed the struggle that we're actually facing. So looking at that, so it's a good question to say, what have you tried so far? And what would you judge as the success rate of that so far? How would you, and here's one of my favorite questions that I ask my clients when they have attempted solutions. Okay, so how would you grade yourself on that one? Give yourself a grade on how well you did that. This is really important when, say, you're talking to them about a conversation they're having with somebody else. Like, say, you're talking to a salesperson who is having a conversation with a potential customer, and so much is helped by not because usually that's a difficult situation that they're dealing with if they're coming to you with it, meaning they're having a struggle closing this deal. So asking questions, what did you try and how did you grade yourself? Don't ask, how did they take it? What was their response? When they're reporting to you back to what they've been doing, first question does not ask how their communication went over. The first question is, how do you think you did? Because what I want is them judging themselves by their own standards, not based on the receptivity they get. Because sometimes the receptivity they get is not related. Sometimes it's better confidence building to think about, well, how well did I did versus how I thought I was going to do? How well did I do based on what I prepared to do, based on my preparation? So a great question is, how do you think you did? Give yourself a grade. What's beautiful about that is they're usually coming to us wondering what grade we're going to give them. And it's so much better when you turn it back on them. How do you think you did? Give yourself the grade. This is excellent. And so much of what I teach applies in all leadership, especially parenting, because I think it's the most important leadership role on the planet. As a parent, asking your child, well, how do you think you did? Is so much better because they are always afraid or wondering, are we going to grade them? What grade are we going to give them? Are we going to give them bad feedback? I got to a place when my kids were growing up that I just realized, you know what? I don't want them so focused on what I think about them. What I want them is focused on what they think about themselves. So much so, and this is kind of controversial, but for a long time, I did not say, I'm proud of you. Because so many times when we say, I'm proud of you to a child or to an employee, it's because of a job that they did. And I wanted my children, especially, to know that, look, I love you and I think you're great no matter what job you do, no matter whether you hit a home run or strike out or whether you get an A or an F. I'm proud to have you as my child. The question is, are you proud to be you? That's what I want to think about. Because out in the world, what really matters is not what dad thinks about you. What really matters is what do you see in the mirror and what do you think about you? So it's a really good question is how do you think you did? There's another question that creates movement is, okay, so what do you think you're capable of? It's a very open-ended question, but it does spark a lot of thought. What do you think you're capable of in this situation? Because it's a way of asking that grading question, but not about the past, but about the future. You're asking them, what grade would you give yourself on what you could potentially do next? What do you think you're capable of? And what's amazing is when you ask that question, very, very rarely do you get some self-aggrandizing, puffed up, I think I'm capable of completely changing everything. You usually get a more kind of sheepish, and that's an opening to understand where their true confidence is. Because if they give you the I can do everything, or if they give you a very sheepish answer, you know their confidence is low. Either one of those answers says their confidence is low. If they say I can do everything, that is a puffed up response. It's kind of like when somebody says they've got a really big ego. That person's got a big ego. What we're really saying is that person has a real small ego that has been inflated because it feels so small. It's a measure of insecurity. But you ask, what do you think you're capable of? What you're looking for is honesty. And then recognizing that people are always usually more capable than they think they are. And so you can follow it up with whatever answer they give. Okay. If you had 10% more confidence, what do you think you're capable of? Put it there. What do you think you're capable of? You could even take it to an extreme, if your life depended on it, what do you think you're capable of? But I like the term, the open-ended, what do you think you're capable of? Because it does begin to spur the possibility of movement. What grade would you give yourself on something you did? What do you think you're capable of on something you're about to do? Either way, notice the position you're placing yourself vis-a-vis them. You are not above them, telling them, I need you to do this for me. You are here underneath them, helping to launch them out into what they're called to do, what they've been hired to do, what they're striving to do. You position yourself that way as through these questions, not as I'm the hero and I need your help doing it. No, you're the hero and I'm here to help you be that. That's the magic of asking questions. When we come back, we're about to go to break. When we come back, we're going to deliver what I promised at the beginning, the one question that is guaranteed to create movement no matter what. And we'll come back to that right after this break. I'm your host, Hal Runkel. You can always reach me at halrunkel.com. You can even schedule a conversation with me on that website. It's just HalRunkel.com. We are talking about questions that leaders ask in order to create movement. And so far, we've asked the questions about a past activity that someone you are leading has done, and a question that's designed to help them go into an activity that they're about to do. Question about the past is, how would you grade yourself? You don't ask about how it went. You don't ask about results. You ask about what was the process like for you, because what you're wanting to see is how well did they perform according to how they wanted to perform. Now, so many times what we think is, well, I can't judge that until I see what the result is. I'm asking before you tell me what the result is, because I want to know, what were you thinking about as you were doing it? How were you judging yourself as you were doing it? And because here's the reality is, you can do a fantastic job on something and still not get the result from the other person that you wanted. You didn't close the sale. Okay. Well, maybe that had nothing to do with you whatsoever. Did you perform in a way that increased the likelihood that you would have gotten that sale? Great. That's fantastic. Unless there were some, egregiously awful mistakes that you made, then great. Let's do another one, because we know especially when it comes to sales, some will, some won't. So what? Keep going. The only way you can keep going is if you're judging, all right, how well am I doing? How well am I doing? How well am I doing? And if you're looking for that from everybody else, that can be helpful, but you want is to help them learn to judge themselves. So if it's about a past conversation, how do you think you did? Second, going into a future situation, what do you think you're capable of? Challenging them. It's a question that actually champions and challenges at the same time. Because you don't ask it if you don't think they're capable of anything. So already you're conveying that I believe you're capable of something, but what do you think you're capable of? And helping to spur their imagination as to what might happen. Okay. Another question that can create movement. Now, I've teased you a couple of times with the question that always actually gets people unstuck, especially it's the best question I know of to ask yourself when you're really, really stuck on something. But another question is, this one is when you're dealing with someone who seems to be really locked in on a position, really locked in to almost to where it seems as if facts are going to do nothing to change their opinion. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot more of that. And there's a lot of reasons for that. People are trying to figure it out. I think the echo chamber that social media actually creates by uniting us more and more with ideas we already have and secluding us from ideas we don't share. It's reducing the expansion of our minds to begin to consider other alternatives. So when you're dealing with someone and their intractability, their refusal to move off this issue is actually costing your team, and it's costing your family, it's costing a relationship or something. Here's the only question I've ever seen that has a chance of working when they're really dug in and it doesn't matter what facts you present. Okay, I hear you. So what would it take? Well, what do you mean? Well, what would it take for you to have some different thoughts about that? Well, nothing. Nothing. There's no at all fact that could ever be presented to you that would ever lead you to change your mind that this is the exact way to go. Nothing. Doesn't matter if there's facts presented to the contrary, it doesn't matter. See, I already made the mistake saying it that way of getting into a yes or no thing. What would it take is the way you ask the question. What would it take for you to change your mind? And then shut up and just sit there. And what's amazing is it actually helps them see how they've painted themselves into a corner. What possible change of circumstance? And if it takes going to the absolute extreme, this is going way back when I was a therapist and I worked with domestic violence a lot. And one of the most frustrating things is seeing a partner who absolutely refuses to leave or do anything different. They don't have to leave, but they have to do something different to the dynamic where they're continuing to be abused. It's a heartbreaking, heart-wrenching situation. There's so many social dynamics involved. Okay, I understand that what he has done it is not enough for you to do something radically different. So what would it take? And I would go to ridiculous extremes. What would he have to do to you? What would he have to do to your kids? What would he have to do to your family? Tell me a scenario where that wouldn't work. Instead of you telling them why they're wrong, you're asking them to tell themselves a situation, which, again, all we're trying to do is create movement here. Movement off of a hardened position. If that's not enough to move you, what would it take to move you? And it's a question that gauges how intractable they are. It tells you, all right, how irrational is this person willing to be in order to defend this position, especially if you think it's an indefensible position. So what would it take for you to change your mind about this team member? What would it take for you to actually believe that this team member is not as evil and out to get you as you think they are? All right, I've teased you enough. Here's the question. So let's say you are stuck, not knowing what to do. And I call this my bazooka question because it's the one big one that I save for the last when I'm working with clients. You're stuck. You don't know what to do in a life situation. You have got a boss who is berating you, but the job pays well. You've got an employee that performs really, really well, but nobody trusts or likes the person. You've got a financial situation where it's the sunk cost that you've already put into it is tempting you to keep pouring money down it. You are so close to the situation, it's very difficult for you to be detached enough to have an objective answer. So here's the question. 30 years from now, take one of your kids. Think about them. They're at the same age you're at right now. What would you tell them to do? If they don't have kids, think of the one person that means the most to you. And usually it's a younger person, niece, nephew, somebody. But what would you tell them to do in the same situation? What is amazing about this question is it cuts through all of your emotional attachments to the trees right in front of you and helps you see the bigger forest around you and says, okay, yeah, what I would tell them is, yeah, life's too short. Don't keep sinking costs into that thing. Or what I would tell them is, you know what? This employee, they may be performing well, but if nobody trusts them, it's not going to last. What this question does is offer the value of perspective. Both longitudinally, you've lived long enough to understand that, you know what, this is not the end. Whatever situation it feels like you're going to end, it's not. But also, it gives you perspective, a broader perspective that, you know what, there's lots of different other options out there. It feels like there's only one. You've got to keep trying and trying and trying, but no. If your kid came to you 30 years from now in the exact same situation you're in now, what would you advise them to do? Try it next time you're stuck. I promise you it will give you movement from your position, even if it's slight, to give you a different perspective and some new thoughts. All right, this has been the Leader's Pause. Thank you for joining me, and I'll be back in a couple of weeks. And till then.
You have been listening to The Leader's Pause with Hal Runkel, the show that helps leaders like you find calm, get clear, and level up. Tune in every first and third Thursday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern on Transformation Talk Radio to access your greatest superpower, the ability to pause, think, and decide for yourself. Book a conversation with Hal today. Visit halrunkel.com.